If you've ever been in the woods at night, you know that silence isn't comforting. It's a warning. On this hunt, I didn't hear it coming yet. Somehow, it already knew exactly where I was. It still feels strange to say this out loud, but the last footage recorded on my brother's night vision camera, the one I watched on a loop for weeks afterward, never matched the world I thought I lived in. And if you've ever been to Forks, Washington, you already know how the woods there can swallow sound, light, and sometimes people. My name is Aaron Pierce. I'm 31, and until last winter I thought I understood what fear was. Real fear isn't the moment you see something impossible. Real fear is the slow realization that something impossible has been watching you long before you ever noticed it. I wasn't a hunter. That was my brother, Kyle. He grew up obsessed with tracking wildlife, trail cams, the thrill of the chase. I was the quiet one, the type who edits videos indoors while he runs around the Olympic National Forest before sunrise. But last December, Kyle begged me to come with him on a night hunt strictly to film. He said he'd been hearing something big out in the forest around Crescent Lake, something he'd never been able to identify. Something that didn't move, like a bear or a cougar. He wanted proof, and he wanted me behind the camera. I agreed because Kyle wasn't just my brother, he was the person who kept me grounded, the one who dragged me out of my head when anxiety turned the walls into cages. I owed him more than one night in the woods. The only rule he had was simple: keep the camera rolling no matter what you hear. It sounded dramatic at the time, but later, much later, I realized his voice had shaken a little when he said it. Not enough to notice then, enough to haunt me now. We hiked into the woods just after sunset. The winter air felt thin, sharp, like the forest had exhaled every bit of warmth out of spite. Kyle carried his rifle. I carried the infrared camera. And though I didn't want to admit it, the deeper we went, the more I felt like we were trespassing not on private land, but into something ancient, watching, patient. Kyle tried to keep the mood light with jokes, but his eyes kept flicking toward the darkness between the fir trees. I had seen him hunt since we were kids. He never acted like prey before. The first odd thing happened about 40 minutes in. The forest went silent. Not quiet silent. No owls, no insects, no wind pushing against branches. As if the whole environment was stuck holding its breath, Kyle stopped walking and whispered without turning around. "You feel that too, right?" I did, but saying yes felt like giving the silence permission to get inside my chest. I swung the camera around, scanning the trees. On the night vision screen, everything looked normal, if normal means an endless pattern of trunks like ribs wrapping around us. Then something flickered at the very edge of the frame, a branch bending. But there was no wind. "Probably a deer," I muttered. Kyle didn't respond. He was staring at the same spot I had just filmed, his grip tightening on the rifle. When I looked back, nothing moved. We kept going. Hooks, subtle ones, started catching on the back of my mind. Small signs that something wasn't right. For instance, I swear we passed the exact same fallen log twice, even though we never changed direction. The snow around it had a single set of prints ours, but the log itself seemed positioned differently the second time, as if something had moved it and then tried to put it back. Kyle brushed it off. "You're tired. Woods mess with your bearings." Except his voice didn't sound convinced. About an hour into the hike, we reached a small clearing where Kyle had set up a trail cam the week before. He crouched down to retrieve it, But when he held the device up to show me, the front lens had been crushed inward, as if squeezed, not smashed. "A bear wouldn't do this," he whispered. I didn't say anything, but my palms started sweating despite the cold. The camera had deep indentations, almost like fingers, long ones. I lifted my own camera to inspect the woods again. "We should go back," I said. "Something's not." A snap came from behind us. Not a twig, something heavier, deliberate. We froze. Kyle slowly chambered around, his breath visible in short, shaky bursts. I turned the infrared camera toward the sound. Through the green glow, shapes of trees sharpened into vertical lines. Empty. I swept left. Nothing. I swept right. And something stepped behind a trunk, just out of view. Not animal movement, not casual. It was quick, calculated, and too tall. The silhouette had been wrong. Too narrow, too upright, almost human, but not shaped right. My heartbeat spiked so fast I felt it in my teeth. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Kyle didn't answer. His eyes were locked forward, and I realized he wasn't breathing. Another sound, this time closer. A low vibration, almost a hum, but layered, like multiple tones at once. The kind of sound you feel more than hear. I swung the camera wildly, catching flashes of movement too quick to define. Trees, snow, branches, until suddenly something appeared dead center in the frame. Two reflective points, eyes hovering a good 8 feet off the ground. They weren't glowing from within. They were reflecting my infrared like animal eyes, but they were too still, too aware, fixed directly on me. My throat tightened. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, just watched. Then, without a sound, they vanished. Like someone cut them out of reality. Kyle grabbed my arm. "We're leaving. Now." We didn't argue. We started moving fast, not running, but close. Every few steps I'd turn the camera back, expecting to catch another glimpse. And every time, there'd be a sense no, certainty that something moved just after the camera passed it. The forest finally started making noise again, but it was wrong. Bird calls at the wrong pitch, branches rustling against windless air. Even our footsteps sounded muffled, like the snow tried to swallow the noise instead of crunching under our boots. The deeper the sounds grew, the more I realized they weren't a sign of normalcy returning. They were imitations, mimicry, something practicing being part of the forest. Kyle stopped once more when we reached the fallen log again, yes, the same one. But this time, there were tracks beside it. Not ours, not anything I recognized. They were long, narrow impressions, with a strange backward bend, spaced too far apart for any four-legged animal, as if something walked on two legs, but wasn't built for it. Kyle whispered, "Aaron, something's circling us." Before I could respond, a distant sound echoed through the woods, a voice, my voice. "Kyle, this way." It was perfect, identical. But I hadn't spoken. I felt ice settle in my stomach. My mouth went dry. "Don't follow it," I croaked. Kyle nodded, terrified. Then the forest went silent again. And Kyle said words I will never forget. "It's not leading us. It's hurting us." The moment Kyle said those words, "It's hurting us," I felt something shift inside me. A different kind of fear. Not panic. Not adrenaline. Something colder, heavier. Like the forest itself had closed a fist around us and was slowly pulling. We moved fast, trying to retrace our steps, but the woods didn't look the same anymore. Landmarks looked warped. trees seemed spaced too evenly, like a pattern instead of nature. I kept the camera steady even though my hands trembled violently. Kyle whispered directions. Left, keep straight, don't look back. But I heard doubt in every word. He didn't know where we were anymore. The thing trailing us did. Every few minutes we'd hear it shift. A soft footstep in snow, a brush of bark, a low vibrating hum that rattled against my ribcage. But whenever I swung the night vision camera toward the sound, there'd be nothing except a smear of darkness too solid to be shadow. The silence returned once more hard, suffocating, and that's when it happened. A voice, again. Mine. But this time, it came from somewhere close. Far too close for it to be an echo. Aaron. Just my name. Drawn out, perfect tone, perfect pitch, but hollow, like someone had recorded my voice and stripped out the breath and warmth. Kyle grabbed my coat and yanked me forward. "Don't react to it," he hissed. "Just move." But the voice called again, this time sounding confused, like it was trying to test how much it needed to mimic. Our crashing sound exploded behind us. Something massive, moving fast. Kyle spun around with the rifle just as I lifted the camera. Through the night vision we caught it, just a fraction of a frame, but enough. A tall figure between the trees. Limbs too long. Joints slightly wrong. Like it had been assembled from memory by someone who'd never seen a human up close. Its head tilted, listening. And as we watched, its form seemed to subtly shift, like it didn't have one true shape. Something inside me broke then. My instincts told me to drop everything and run until my lungs burned. But Kyle stayed steady, rifle up, eyes locked on the shifting silhouette. "Back away," he whispered. "Don't turn your back on it." But the creature didn't lunge, didn't attack. It stepped behind a tree and vanished again, like it never existed. "It's playing with us," Kyle said, voice cracking. "It could have taken us already." "Then what does it want?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Maybe there was no answer. Maybe it just observed. We kept moving, but the trees grew denser even though we were heading toward where the trail should have been. Something was wrong with the forest. It bent around the creature. It rearranged itself. I didn't realize how true that was until we saw the clearing again, Kyle's crushed trail cam sitting in the snow exactly where we'd found it an hour earlier. Except we hadn't turned around. We'd walked in a straight line. Kyle knelt beside it, gripping his hair, shaking. "This isn't possible. We didn't turn. We didn't." Before he could finish, the sound returned, the layered hum, rising like a chorus of distorted voices speaking too low to understand. I recorded everything, because that was my last promise to my brother. Keep the camera rolling. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air, through my bones, through the snow. Kyle raised the rifle and shouted into the trees, "Show yourself!" His voice echoed too long, like the forest held onto it and repeated it back wrong. Then, from our left, something stepped into the clearing. Not fully, just enough for the camera to catch the outline. Tall, thin, leaning forward, as though studying us with impossible interest. When the night vision caught its head, the reflective eyes appeared again. Except this time, there were too many. Not 2, 4, then 3, then 2. Like it was adjusting its face to match what it thought we expected. I felt a crackling pressure in my ears. My balance slipped. A ringing like a broken radio filled my head. The creature took one slow step forward. Kyle fired. The gunshot shattered the air, but the creature didn't move. It didn't even flinch. The bullet hit the tree behind it. It had shifted slightly, subtly, as if the space around it bent. Kyle cursed under his breath and fired again, but the rifle jammed. That was the moment the creature finally reacted. Not toward the gun, toward Kyle's voice. It tilted its head, mimicking curiosity. I grabbed Kyle's arm. We have to go. Now. We ran. Snow flying under our boots, breath tearing from our lungs. The camera bounced in my hands, but I didn't stop filming. Behind us, the hum grew louder, no longer a call, but a warning, or a claim. The woods twisted. Landmarks repeated. Branches whipped at us, snagging our jackets like hands trying to turn us around. Kyle shouted directions I couldn't follow. Left, no. Right, no. Just run. Until suddenly the trees broke open and we stumbled onto the real trail, the actual trail. I recognized the signpost, the old wooden bench covered in snow. Relief punched a hole through my chest. We sprinted toward the truck. It sat on the gravel shoulder, exactly where we left it. I fumbled for the keys while Kyle kept the rifle up, eyes locked on the tree line. The forest hissed not wind, not movement, but the hum flattening into one long, droning note, as if the creature had reached the edge of something it couldn't cross. I got the door open. Kyle shoved me inside. I screamed at him to get in. He didn't. He kept staring at the trees. Kyle, get in the truck. His breathing was ragged. His eyes were wide, fixed on something I couldn't see. It's not done, he whispered. It's not done with us, Kyle. Something shifted in the woods. The hum deepened. Kyle climbed into the truck. Slammed the door. Go. I floored it. The road blurred under the headlights, and soon the forest disappeared behind us. But the hum didn't. Not at first. It lingered in the air like static electricity, fading only when we reached town. We didn't speak on the way home, not until we pulled into my driveway in Forks. Kyle looked at me with a kind of fear I had never seen on his face, not of the creature, but of himself. It was calling us, he whispered, and we answered. I didn't understand then, not fully, but I did 2 days later. When Kyle disappeared, there was no struggle, no broken door, no tracks, just his boots left neatly by his bed, and a note on his desk that said only, I heard it again. I rewatched the footage hundreds of times after that, frame by frame. I studied every flicker between the trees, every shape the creature twisted into, every time it mimicked my voice. And on the 10th viewing, I noticed something I'll never unsee. In the final 30 seconds, right before we reached the trail, the camera caught a reflection off one of the trees. Not the creature's eyes, my own face, but warped. Stretched unnaturally tall between the branches, like the forest was still trying to learn me, mimic me, like it hadn't given up. I haven't gone back to the woods since. But sometimes at night, just outside my window, I swear I hear a voice call my name, my exact voice, but hollow, practicing. Ending the story here feels wrong, but that's all I have. I'm still trying to hold on to the truth that the creature didn't follow me back, that the hum in the walls of my house is just the heater, that the shadow at the edge of my yard isn't watching. But deep down, I know the forest didn't let go. It changed tactics. It's waiting. And worse, it's learning. Before I tell you what happened in the mountains outside Bozeman, Montana, I need you to understand something about me. I am not the kind of man who scares easily. My name is Daniel Rourke, 42, third-generation hunter. My father taught me how to track elk before teaching me how to ride a bike. My grandfather survived 2 winters stranded in the Absaroka Range after a freak storm. He came home thinner and quieter, but alive. Fear, in my family, was considered a tool, not a weakness. But none of that mattered last November, when something in those mountains decided to hunt me. And I don't mean a cougar, a wolf, or a bear. I mean something that watched me with intent. Something that knew the shape of my footsteps. Something that was always exactly 1 step closer than it should have been. I took the trip alone. It wasn't supposed to be that way. My brother Mark was supposed to come with me, like he had every hunting season for 20 years, but he died 6 months earlier. ATV, crash, instant, avoidable. We were fighting that week. Something stupid, something I'd give anything to take back. The hunt was supposed to be not closure, exactly, but a way to breathe again. My wife didn't want me going alone. I told her I needed the quiet. I didn't tell her that the quiet was the part I feared most. I camped near Gallatin Canyon, not far from where the forest thickens into a maze of old pines, boulders, and creeks that sound like whispers when the wind angles just right. It's the kind of place where you can walk 10 minutes and lose sight of the sky, where you can hear something behind you and never quite place how far away it is. It had always felt like home, until that weekend. The first day was unremarkable cold air, frost on branches, animal tracks scattered across the soft ground. I wasn't looking for anything big, just movement, just distraction. But around noon, I spotted fresh elk prints and followed them deeper into the woods, farther than I'd originally planned. The air grew colder as I walked, but not the normal kind of cold. More like a stillness pressing against my ears, flattening sound. After a while, I realized I couldn't hear any birds, no insects, not even wind. It was the first hook, subtle but wrong, like the woods had leaned in just to listen. I stopped to adjust my pack, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, deliberate. I froze, hand hovering over my rifle. "Bear," I whispered under my breath. But the spacing wasn't right. Bears don't walk with intention. This sounded like a man, or something shaped like one. I turned around, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just trunks spaced like pillars holding up a cathedral of dead silence. Then, clear as day, a branch snapped about 50 yards back. Too crisp. Too controlled. Someone was out there. I called out, "Hello? You all right?" No answer. I raised my rifle not to shoot, just to steady myself, but something inside me tightened, not fear. Instinct. The same instinct my father always said to trust. If your gut says you're being watched, you are. I waited for the woods to settle, but the woods didn't settle. It stared back. Eventually, I forced myself to keep moving. The prints were still fresh, and daylight was limited. But every step I took, I felt something matching my pace behind me, never close enough to see, never far enough to ignore. Always there, always waiting. The second hook came 20 minutes later. My boot landed beside something half buried in snow. A glove, Mark's glove. Same brand, same faded camo, same little tear he got snagging it on barbed wire 2 years ago. But that glove should have been in his storage locker back home. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding. I picked it up. It wasn't old or weathered. It wasn't dirty. It was warm, fresh, as if someone had just taken it off. "Mark?" I whispered. Ridiculous as it sounded, the woods didn't answer. Not yet. I shoved the glove into my pocket and tried to rationalize it. Maybe he left a spare pair here on our last trip. Maybe I dropped it somehow. Maybe grief was making me see connections that weren't really there. But deep down, something cold started growing in my chest. Something that had nothing to do with the temperature. Dusk came quicker than expected. I hadn't seen a single elk. Not a single deer. Not even rabbit tracks. Something had cleared the woods before I ever arrived, pushed everything away. I headed back toward camp, following the trail I'd marked with orange ribbons. Except the ribbons were gone. All of them. Torn off. Removed. As if something wanted me deeper in the woods, not out. The third hook came when I heard my brother's voice. Danny. Soft. Behind me. I spun so fast I nearly slipped. My rifle almost hit the ground. Mark? Nothing. Just darkness between trees, thick as tar. But I know my brother's voice like I know my own heartbeat. That was him. Or something that wanted me to think it was him. I backed away slowly, rifle raised, trying to control my breathing. And then, maybe 30 yards ahead, something stepped out between the trees. I couldn't see its face, couldn't see details, just height too tall and posture too still. A silhouette shaped almost like a man, but off. Shoulders too narrow, arms too long. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. I aimed my rifle. "Say something," I demanded, voice shaking. It did, not in words, in breath. A long, slow exhale that steamed through the cold like smoke escaping a furnace. Then a step toward me. Not fast, not threatening, casual, confident, like it knew it didn't need to rush. I fired a warning shot into the air. The sound ricocheted off, trees, sharp, jarring, familiar. But the thing didn't react at all. No flinch, no retreat, not even curiosity. It simply turned too smoothly and walked back into the trees. Not fled, walked. As if it knew I wouldn't follow. As if it knew I couldn't. I ran. Not a professional hunter's jog. A frantic heart-in-my-throat sprint. Branches hit my face. Snow kicked upward. I didn't care. I didn't stop until I reached camp, and even then, the air felt wrong. Heavy, thick, unwelcoming. I slept with the rifle across my chest, or tried to sleep. The woods didn't let me. All night, something circled my tent, quietly, slowly, testing the perimeter. Snow, crunching softly. A low scrape against the fabric now and then. Once, a shadow passed between my lantern and the tent wall, stretched and warped like something was studying the structure, deciding if it could get inside. I didn't breathe for a full minute. The steps moved on. The next morning, I found tracks outside, but not boot prints, not paw prints. Long impressions, with a strange backward angle, spaced exactly the same distance apart, like whatever made them didn't rely on trial and error, as if it walked with calculation. I almost packed up camp right there. Almost. But then I thought of Mark. The fight. The guilt. The glove. I needed answers. I needed something to take home besides fear. So I did the stupid thing, the thing that still keeps me up at night. I followed the tracks. They led uphill toward an area my father once told me to avoid, an old charcoal burn site where the ground caved into a shallow basin surrounded by dead trees. Locals called it the Hollow, said animals avoided it. Hunters, too. I always thought it was superstition. Until that day, the tracks went straight into the center of the hollow. And there, scattered across the ground, were bones. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Deer, elk, bear. Some cracked open, some stripped clean, some arranged in deliberate lines. Not random, not natural, organized, like someone or something had been studying them, learning from them. A hunting ground, a classroom. My stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But something else drew my eyes to a stump near the edge of the clearing. Something lying on top of it. Something that didn't belong. A photograph. Weathered, edges curled, but unmistakably real. It was a picture of me and Mark, taken on a hunting trip 5 years earlier, my arm around his shoulders, both of us smiling. That smile hit me like a punch, because we hadn't brought that photo on this trip, because it hadn't existed anywhere near Gallatin Canyon for years, because something had placed it there, waiting for me. The woods behind me shifted. Snow crunched. Slow. Deliberate. The same cadence I'd heard all day. The same rhythm that stalked me the night before. I didn't turn around immediately. I couldn't. The fear was too thick, too alive. When I finally did, the shape was standing at the tree line. Taller now, straighter, studying me with the unmistakable focus of a predator identifying its prey. And as I raised my rifle with trembling hands, useless as it had proven to be, the thing stepped forward into a thin sliver of daylight, just enough that I saw its skin and realized it didn't have any. It was bare muscle and sinew, stretched in the rough approximation of a human body, twitching as if it hadn't quite figured out how to hold itself together. But the head was tilted the way my brother used to tilt his when I said something stupid. The angle was identical, mocking me with memory. And then, in a voice scraped raw and wrong and familiar, it whispered my name. Danny. When that thing said my name, in Mark's exact tone, the rise and fall of it, the shape of the breath behind it, my legs almost gave out. I took a step back, rifle trembling so hard the barrel jittered in my hands. The creature took one step toward me, slow enough to show intention, precise enough to show confidence. It wasn't guessing. It wasn't mimicking blindly. It was choosing me. I fired, not in the air, not as a warning, straight at its chest. The rifle kicked back hard against my shoulder, but the creature didn't react the way a living thing should. The bullet hit. I saw the impact, saw a ripple across its exposed muscle like a drop in still water. No blood, no flinch, no step backward, just that ripple, and then stillness again. It tilted its head the other direction, mimicking confusion at my attempt. No mocking it. I spun and ran. Not away from the clearing, but toward the slope. The only path I knew would take me back to the creek, back to camp, back to some sort of orientation. Snow slid under my boots, branches snapping against my arms as I barreled downhill. Behind me, the sound, not footsteps, not breathing, a dragging hum, like wet fabric pulled over rough stone. A sound that didn't belong anywhere in the natural world. I kept running. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Every instinct said, if you fall, you're done. And then I heard a second sound. Light, soft, deliberate, footsteps matching my rhythm, mirroring it. If I lengthened my stride, the steps lengthened. If I stumbled, they stumbled too. It was following me not by movement, but by imitation. The thought almost made me collapse, that something could learn me so quickly, so completely. 20 minutes of panic blurred into one long smear of cold air and racing heartbeat. The trees finally thinned, revealing the creek below half frozen, narrow, shallow. I hit the bank hard and slid down the incline, boots skidding over ice until I splashed straight into the water. The cold hit like a fist. I waded across, slipping twice, desperate, praying the thing wouldn't cross flowing water. Old myths clawed their way into my head, spirits, creatures, things the land remembers even when people forget. I reached the far bank, pulling myself up with numb fingers. Behind me, the hum stopped. Silence. I turned slowly. The creature stood at the opposite bank, exactly where I'd entered the creek. It didn't step into the water. It paced. One step left, one step right. Studying, calculating, trying to understand something it hadn't encountered before. Something it needed to learn. The way it moved, shoulders rolling, chest stretching like elastic, struggling to take shape, it made my stomach twist. And yet, there was something in the posture that was heartbreakingly familiar. The way Mark used to stand when he was thinking, when he was deciding whether or not to tease me. "Danny," the thing said again. Too loud this time, echoing off the creek banks. Too confident. It had found the exact pressure points of my grief and pressed down hard. I ran again. Not toward camp. I knew camp was compromised now, but toward higher ground where the trees thinned into older, wind-bent growth. If I could get to the ridge, maybe I could get a signal. Maybe I could scream loud enough for someone to hear. Maybe I could just get far enough away that the creature couldn't track me. But hope evaporated 30 minutes later when I heard the footsteps again, not behind me. Ahead, waiting. I slid to a stop, heart thundering in my throat. The trees ahead were too still, too dark, too expectant. And then the creature stepped out from behind a massive pine. Not winded, not wet, not rushed. It hadn't followed the creek. It had learned a better route. It knew the land. It knew me. I slowly lifted my rifle again, though my hands were shaking too violently to aim straight. "You're not him," I whispered, as much to convince myself as the creature. It tilted its head, Mark's tilt, too perfect to be coincidence. "Not him," it echoed, but the words came out twisted, strained, as if language itself was a muscle it didn't quite control. "Danny." I stepped back. It stepped forward. I stepped right. It mirrored me again, but slightly off tempo, like it was adjusting its rhythm, testing it, testing me, hunting me the way I once hunted elk, matching breath patterns, predicting movement, studying weakness. "What do you want?" I choked. It opened its mouth, no teeth, no tongue. Just empty dark, like it wasn't built to answer. Instead, it breathed in, not out, in a long, shuddering inhale that scraped across the inside of its hollow throat. And in that sound, I understood something horrifyingly clear. It wasn't mimicking me to lure me. It was mimicking me to become more like me, to learn my fear, to shape itself around what I dreaded most. My brother's death wasn't what drew the creature to me. My grief was. I stumbled backward. The creature lunged. Not fast, not clumsy. A perfect, fluid motion, like it had practiced the movement 1,000 times in silence. I fired again. Missed. Then again. Missed. It closed the distance in an instant. I tripped over a fallen branch and hit the ground hard, snow exploding around me. The creature stopped inches from my face, leaning over me, studying. Its surface rippled, reforming, tightening. The outline of a jaw. A hint of cheekbone. My brother's cheekbone. It was becoming him. Or becoming what it thought would break me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. And then, out of some buried instinct, not bravery, I reached into my pocket and grabbed the glove. Mark's glove. The one I found in the snow. I threw it at the creature. Not as a weapon, as a plea. As a distraction. Something. The creature caught it. Not gracefully, awkwardly, like a reflex it didn't fully understand. It stared at the glove with jerky, twitching movements, confused by the scent, the texture, the meaning. It didn't know how to understand memory, emotion, connection. Those weren't things it could mimic, and in that hesitation, I crawled backward, scrambled to my feet, and ran. I don't remember how long or how far I ran. Only that night came again, and the cold turned vicious, and the forest became a maze of shadows that felt alive. But eventually, impossibly, I saw headlights through the trees, a road, a truck, a man stepping out, asking if I was hurt, if I was lost. I collapsed at his feet. When they searched the woods later, they found my campsite, my tracks, but no other tracks. No hollow filled with bones, no photograph on a stump, nothing out of place. They said it was trauma, exhaustion, grief bubbling over. They said the mind creates monsters when guilt becomes too loud. Maybe they're right, but I know what I heard, what I saw, what followed me, what learned me. And sometimes, God help me, sometimes, at night, I hear footsteps outside my house, soft, careful, matching my pace on the floorboards as I walk from room to room. Sometimes I hear my brother's voice calling from the tree line behind my backyard. Not sad, not angry, not lost, just curious, practicing, learning, waiting for me to step outside.